Franklin County Commissioners meeting, September 25th, 2018.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. Welcome to the regular weekly board meeting of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. For the record, all three commissioners are here, Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Miller, and myself, Commissioner Peck, along with County Administrator Mr. Johnson. At this time, we officially call the order of the meeting and ask you to join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on our agenda this morning is Mr. Wilson with Passport. He comes and sees us about once a year, this time of year, every year.
Yeah.
You're welcome to come back more often.
Oh, well, I used to come in and make reports about every 3 months or so, and you told me, you don't really have to be here.
I said you're welcome. I didn't say we were solicited.
Okay, good. This is the budget. I've given you several sheets. One of them is about our expenditures, showing where we increase our expenditure budgeted items. I'm looking at that right now, 2006 for the salaries and wages part, 1230 for the personnel benefits, which we're forced to do because we have one person that, well, he'll be on Social Security or Medicare here in October, November. I mean, I'm not loud enough? Okay. I'll talk louder. But he'll still get the PEEP stuff. Supplies, $1,000 up there. And professional services is the biggest jump, $20,526. Basically, the biggest part of that went into the professional services and enforcement. That was about $66,000, and now it's $86,000. A little bit went into repair and maintenance. And then the trucks, capital outlay, $2,506. We may buy another new truck here, if not next year, the year before, or year after. In terms of revenue, both our taxable parcels went up about 700 parcels, so that's about $1,000. But our acreage went down about, well, it was 19.8 something, so it went down about 600 parcels or acres. So that's about $2,400 lost. So we have a little bit less coming in on our assessment, but we had a good, healthy leftover, and we put most of that towards the professional services and enforcement. If you remember, I was asked that by the guy on my left here. We, in 2013, explained why we want to get that category up to $100,000. We just took out a 6.5 acre orchard, and it cost us $6,200, $1,000 an acre. So if we had an 80 acre one, we'd have more fun. Just depends on what happens. Fire, blight, bugs, abandoned orchard, you name it. So that's why we want that so large. Otherwise, that's it.
Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Miller, any questions?
Looks pretty straightforward.
Could you explain again why the professional services up 19,000? What was the reason?
Professional service, that's the one category we're trying to get to 100,000, because that's where we take the money out of when we have to do any enforcement on our orchard. We already take money out of there for CLRV testing, because that's an enforcement action on our part. We took 6,000 out of it this year, 6,200 for an orchard, a 6.5 acre orchard that we pulled. And that's the one that we want to get up to $100,000 in case we get a big orchard that has a problem and we have to spend $1,000 an acre on 80 acres, you know.
So you had 86,000 last year. Did you meet that?
We had 66,000.
Okay, you get 86. Oh, that's a plus 19, makes it
Yeah.
86, so you're not close to 100,000.
Well, $14,000 away. We'll
You're
get
closer,
there.
you're closer. Okay.
Got a few questions. Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Miller, weigh in any time. Any other questions you might have? Tom, what's the history on us having to spend money to take out orchards? You did 6.5 acres this year. What's the biggest year you remember in the last decade?
Oh. God, I've been doing this for 20 some odd years. Decade. I think 40 acre orchards that we had pulled up and burned. They were out east of 395 back in their day, got fire blight. They really had fire blight pretty bad. I think there was like 40 acres. There was one 22 acre hunk, another 5, and another 6 or 7, something like that, at close to 40 acres.
Yeah. About when was that, you think, the last?
Oh, heck, that had to be, it had to be 10 years ago anyway, maybe.
First half of your time here.
I really couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Okay. So, if that's the history, help me understand why we're, excuse me, escrowing $100,000 of public funds. If in the 20 years you've been here, the biggest we've ever done is 40. Is there a reason to think that the risk has changed?
Probably increased because we have more orchards that are just giving it up. More people have gone into organic orchards, and like this year, it was calling them off like crazy, and it was harder than heck to find out where they were, let alone solve the problem for them. I see some of these guys saying if this happens again, I'm done, you know. Now, does that mean they're going to sell their orchard to somebody who's going to do it with chemicals? Or does that mean they're going to sell it to some other guy who's unfortunate enough to try organic again? You know, that's the biggest thing that I see happening. Outside of the fact that for some reason or this year was really buggy.
So, how is it that, and I'm asking because I just don't know, but how is it that we, the county, the people of Franklin County, become responsible for taking out these orchards? Do the owners just up and walk away?
No, you can't just let them sit there because they then become infested and infested orchards around it that are doing the right thing and trying to do the right thing.
Sure.
And so you can't just let it sit there because it'll just become a breeding parlor for whatever kind of problem we got, not just collymouth, leaf rollers, all sorts of different things.
Do we have any ability to go to the owners and require them?
Oh yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to go through that. It was May of this year that one orchard just complained to me about the orchard that we took out, and that didn't get taken out until August. Because it takes that long, you got to contact the owner. Now the owner, and this one was kind of weird because the guy was on the county records as the owner. He got the tax bill, but he forwarded it to the company that foreclosed on him. However, they never filed a foreclosure with the county, so he was still technically the owner. And I must have talked to 6 different people at this banking thing, and they didn't know anything about it. And so finally when I said, okay, we're just going to take out the orchard and put a lien on the property, then I got phone calls saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't want you to put a lien on the property. So it's not just something you call them up and a week later go out and do it. It takes time. You got to have the right paperwork and complaints filed. And
Yep, I understand that, and I appreciate the explanation, because my next question you essentially answered, which is, we then lien the property, right?
right.
Okay. And
If I don't get the check from the bank, they said 30 days they pay up. If I don't have it, I'll put a lien on it.
okay, so is it common for us to have a situation where we go in and we abate or take out an orchard because someone either won't pay to do it or won't do it in a timely fashion, and then we were unable to collect from them?
So far, I've only had to put lien on one hunk of property, And the poor guy bought it because evidently I didn't do the lien right or something. It came across as a contractor's lien, which is supposedly only good for 6 months or something. I'm not sure I understand it completely. But anyway, it wasn't on the lien when he bought it at courthouse steps. And it wasn't on the record. And then we went to him because we had the lien, and we told him, and he was just all upset and everything like that. And the title company just says, well, the contract lien, we don't know anything about it, you know. Okay. So we went to him, and he paid us $1,000 a month, $1,000 a year for the last 8 years, and paid it back.
So it sounds like we've always been able to collect on these.
Yeah.
So if we've always been able to collect the money back, and in your 20-some years of being here, the biggest one you remember was 40 acres, and it's $1,000 an acre, I'm just kind of wondering why we feel we need $100,000 in escrow, recognizing that.
Okay, what if you had 240 acres?
Just finish if I could, please. Let's say it was 40 or 50, and you had 40 or 50 in the account we've covered. That would exceed what we've had in the last 20 years since you've been here. If we had a scenario where we unexpectedly had 240s, I would think that the other 40 could be out of reserves from the county to be paid back over time. So I'm just looking at it from a budget standpoint. You know, is there some other purpose or use for that 100,000 professional services, or is it all for this emergency abatement?
Well, it's also used for CLRV testing. That's only a couple, $3,000 a year. The samples that we take in. That's about it. And when something like this 6.5 acre thing came up.
Sure. I'm not disagreeing with you on the process of having funds reserved ahead of time to do this. I'm just looking at the historical record, which says the most we've done is 40 acres, and we have a vehicle for doing additional acreage if we had an unexpected situation. You know, I'm always mindful that this is public money and it comes from somewhere to start with, and I know you know that too. I'm just looking for a little more basis for carrying 100,000 there.
Sure. I got a letter right here that he asked me for. I gave it to you guys in 2013,
Right.
explaining the whole thing
Right.
about why we're wanting to do that.
Sure.
And I don't think anything's changed in that about why we want to have. That's my board wants to have.
Anything in that letter that we haven't discussed today that I'm overlooking?
Can I see that for a second? I don't know. It's long. Okay. A large commercial grower entered foreclosure. This was in Yakima County. This consisted of 29 different orchard blocks of about 300 acres spread throughout the county. The properties were unmanaged for some time and brought to the attention of Yakima Board. Blah, blah, blah. These orchards can decline rapidly into infested sites in as little as 30 days. Getting reimbursed for this can cost $150 per acre and is temporary at best. That's spraying. Getting reimbursed for this work can be difficult and impossible from the owner dealing, so then you got to place a lien on the property. In this case, the cost would be $45,000, and once it's not enough, that's to spray it. Removal at a cost of 400 to 500 acres, and now it's 1,000 acre. Couldn't total, in that case, it would have totaled $300,000.
Did that actually happen where they weren't reimbursed?
And I don't know if they were reimbursed on that or not, but they did have that problem up there.
Sure. That's fairly uncommon, isn't it?
Well, they have that big a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Let me move on to some other parts of this budget here. I forget, how many trucks do you guys have?
How many what?
Trucks.
Trucks. You asked me the same question you did the other day. We got 3 that are in use and 1 that's a backup. And we have an ATV.
And I forget how many folks you have that are out,
3 including myself.
they're out in the field.
Right.
And I think as you were describing that, you answered a few of the other questions I had, so let me just check if I have any others here. Looking at your wages and benefits, it looks like we're providing full personnel benefits to part-time employees.
One of them. Well, one's has to have state retirement taken out, and then myself and the other guy already retired up on the state, so we don't have any state retirement taken out. But he's limited to how many hours he can work. It's like 987 or 867, something like that. Yeah, 800. And I'm not limited at all because I'm a TRS-1. I don't get anything. I don't get vacation. That's a state mandated sick leave thing that they put on. We got sneeze once in a while, I guess. Right. But the one guy is retired from the irrigation district, and he gets the medical, dental, all that stuff, insurance, and Viva plan.
Is he the only one that gets those benefits?
Yeah.
And he's part-time, full-time?
He's 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, from about the beginning of April through probably, yeah.
But annually part-time?
Right.
Is he getting benefits year-round?
No. He doesn't. He still gets his, I don't know how he gets his insurance, but that won't be an issue anymore because I think it's October, November he goes on Medicare.
Okay. All right.
Is there a supplement for the county employees that are on Medicare?
That's a great question. The person that has the answer is sitting right back there. Carly, can you help us?
Is there supplement insurance for a person who's working for the county is on Medicare?
We are still obligated as an employer to provide the same level of medical insurance benefits as we do for those that aren't Medicare eligible, and my understanding is under Medicare rules, the county plan pays first, and then Medicare.
So the person has to keep the county plan after he gets Medicare?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is it as a supplement or as a full insurance?
It's the full insurance, and like I said, I believe under Medicare's rules, the county plan pays first, and then Medicare.
How do you happy to know that?
Is that factored in your budget, Tom?
Well, it is in terms of our budget, our $1,030 for medical dental, and he's a 7-month employee.
He's on the books year-round and gets benefits year-round, correct?
No, I don't know what he does when he's
Okay.
I don't know if he goes Cobra or what he does.
So he's working the 32 hours a week, which is what's qualifying for the full-time benefits, but it's only seasonal.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Commissioners, any other questions?
No, I have none.
Well, the only thing I was caught up on was that professional service, just anticipating that there might be some other problem. Your budget balances revenue versus expenses with that in there, but you're trying to get up to 100,000. That's not anticipated, or that is anticipated to cover maybe some emergency,
Right.
something. And your board has approved that
Right.
and wants it to go that way, so your budget meets. And the only other thing you can do is reduce the budget and make it so that there's less, and then anticipate if this happens, we come back and get something, a contingency. But other than that, we're talking about 20,000 or whatever it was, dollars, 19,000, I think, from the change to last year. I always like to see it side by side, last year and there. I can look it up and from last year.
Yeah.
But it's always nice right here to see it. But regardless, your budget meets, and it doesn't seem to be out of line in any way, so.
Okay.
And Tom, your repairs and maintenance, is that for ER&R? For vehicles?
Vehicles, yeah. And sometimes we go over on that one quite a bit.
Okay. The tree replacement program is the vouchers you give out.
Right.
Okay. Is that still a popular program?
Not as many trees as in the past, but still around 100 a year.
Okay. So if we were to decide that the current level for professional services enforcement didn't need this extra $19,600, excuse me, the result would be a reduction in the assessment on growers, both parcels and acres. Is that accurate?
I haven't discussed that with our board yet. I think that'll come up when we post that 100,000 deal. But one of the problems, if you lower an assessment and then something does happen, it's going to take you a heck of a lot longer to get the fund built back up and you paid off or whoever we borrow it from. If you lower, you lower an assessment like that, and the problem with the assessment is sometimes we do like we did this year, where we lost about $1,400 because we lost $2,400 in acreage that was pulled out, but we gained what, 1,000 something in parcels, so we're down about $1,400 on our assessment.
Right.
So
if you were to not increase this professional services line, though, you'd be up $18,200.
okay.
So, but the assessment, by any other measure, is a tax, and
Right.
obviously we ought not tax citizens beyond what's absolutely necessary. And so I'm having a little difficulty with the notion that, as I said earlier, in 20 years of history, the biggest hit we've had was a 40-acre, which in today's dollars would be $40,000, but we're targeting $100,000. And I remember the letter and I understand the explanations for it. But it appears to me that these assessments, unless I hear a better historical argument for needing $100,000 in escrow, because as I said earlier, if we had an emergency situation and we needed the extra money, that the county has reserves, and because this board approves this budget, the county would be in a position to provide those funds for reimbursement later. It seems to me that we're overtaxing our growers by $18,418. I'm taking off the $1,400 loss from this year. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't want to spend a lot more time on it, but I think there's an opportunity here to demonstrate our beliefs that we don't want to tax or assess more than we think is absolutely necessary. I'm not convinced that we're on that path right now. So the option for the board here is that we've got a resolution before us has been presented for approval of the budget as presented. If there is a motion to approve, then commissioners have the opportunity to comment and vote as they will. I think I've said my piece, other than my preference would be to see your board take another crack at this and reevaluate this need for $100,000 as a reserve.
We don't have a board meeting until March of 2019, at which time I will bring all this up to them. And of course, any one of you is welcome to come. I'm just looking at this so we could drop in the future, we could drop the growers from $4 an acre to $3 an acre, and that would take care of our $19,000 basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that, I think what I heard you just say is that...
That's what I'm going to suggest to our board.
Yeah, and that's per acre.
Right.
So what I think I just heard you say is that instead of $4 an acre, it could be $3 an acre if we weren't adding this 19,000.
Right.
So if it's at 3 and you take it up to 4, you're increasing it 33% to build this fund. And I'm questioning the necessity for the fund, and I realize that kind of out on a limb there because I'm not a horticulture pest guy in the least, but I do know budgets, and I do know math, and I do know that the county has a reserve. So I think I'm inclined to say that my support would be contingent on holding the professional services enforcement line where it is, with the understanding that if there's an emergency that goes over, the county is in a position to backstop that. And the understanding being that assessment, instead of $4 an acre, could be lowered to 3. And if there's a problem doing that this year, then I would think we could credit that forward. There ought to be a mechanism for that.
So my concern, again, was, you just putting in there and anticipating. To me, it would almost be better if you had a reserve for anticipating something like this yourselves in this, because we see that with the mosquito board and other places that have reserves in case there's a disastrous flyover they have to do for mosquitoes. So I sometimes wonder why, and that's why I asked, the board approved this, the board's familiar with this, so it's already been through the board on this request. So with that, it seems like they're the ones, the professionals, that know what's going on, because they are the people this is being served. They're the ones being assessed, correct?
Correct.
So that would be my only other thought, other than what.
Forgive the interruption, but that's incorrect. That board is not the people who are being assessed. It's the.
They're growers and they're being assessed too.
And that's what I mean. It's a grower board representation.
Okay. They're a very small fraction of the people
Oh,
being
yeah.
assessed. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but that's generally what happens in these commodity groups. You got the board that represents, and they're the ones that should get fired. They're not doing the right job. But anyway, regardless of that, I didn't like the anticipation of 19,000 being up there. I'd rather see it as a reserve and then maybe pass, because sometimes there's trouble getting our reserve contingency from here too. If we're stuck somewhere also. But at this point, I would agree that we change either that to its own reserve, maybe bring it back, or leave it and just not anticipate that there's going to be a second orchard coming out at 40 acres. And so with you going back to the board in March or whenever it was, the next meeting you have, that would be probably more appropriate.
Tom, can you call a special meeting and have this adjusted this fall yet?
Yeah, but I don't think we'll affect taxes this year. Because the tax bill's coming out here October.
Yeah.
Tom, when do you set your assessments for each year?
August and September. September is the final time.
So you've already set your assessments for 19 based on this budget.
Right.
Seems to you like we've got this backward. Before the horse. Maybe this discussion ought to happen before the assessments. Yeah. And Commissioner Miller, to your comment, the 4106 professional services - enforcement line, what they've done obviously is to incorporate a reserve into that. If that line was broken out, it would say probably, well, he said that their CRV testing is 2,000 to 3,000 a year. So let's say they had 5,000 in that line, and then everything else essentially is this reserve, as Tom has explained. Yeah. So the other line would be 81,000 in reserves, and all I'm doing is saying that in 20 years, the biggest hit we've had in today's dollars would be 40,000.
Right.
So we're double it, plus we have the county's capacity. And if this didn't impact the assessments, that would be one thing, but it's the difference between $4 an acre or $3 an acre, and it's not that it's a huge amount of money in raw dollars, for the average farm probably. It's more the principle that we ought not be assessing $4 an acre or $3 is adequate. So.
In agriculture, in tougher times now with things, it seems like with the cherries and everything going on now, so this probably is a good time not to raise the assessment and bring it down if we can. So I can agree with that.
I could probably call a special meeting just for that purpose. right after the holidays, early January, something like that. Sometimes these workers are hard to get a hold of in the winter. They go to Cancun or Hawaii or some other place and complain about the apple prices. But I can try to find a time this winter to get them together and discuss that and change it for the coming year, 2019.
So, Keith,
That would basically take that 19,000 out of the budget, 19,289 out of the budget, and drop the budget by that amount, and then we'd have to do something with the actual expenditures, change that.
well, the piece I'm concerned about is the taxes. The growers have already been assessed that, and
Right, for this year, but if we can get it changed so that next year, starting with the first assessment, it doesn't happen, it's down to $3.
well,
I mean, this doesn't hold now. This is for 2019 collection in April, so we can get it changed before then, I would think, if the board will go along with it.
yeah. Well, with all due respect to your board, it's not up to them. It's up to these three characters.
It's up to you three to approve the budget, right, but it's up to them to adopt what they want.
I understand. And my guess is that if they knew that the county was willing to offer our reserves for an emergency fund, should we have something that we haven't seen in the last 20 years, they probably would say, well, in that case, we don't need that big a reserve. That's a data point they didn't have when this budget was built. So I suspect if they knew that then, they probably would say, yeah, we'd be fine.
And then there were times when the county didn't have a reserve.
Well, that's right. We had 40,000 when I got here. Now we've got a pretty healthy reserve and a policy, and it's taken a long time, but we understand reserves. Okay, so with that.
So if we call this 86,000 a reserve rather than a budget item,
What I would say is your reserve is too big for the need, and as it's causing you to overtax the growers. That's what I would
right,
say.
but instead of putting it in the enforcement thing, make it a reserve,
I
drop
would
the
recommend
growers
a
down to
professional
3,
services line that's 5,000-10,000 tops, and
put the rest in reserve.
And then you have a reserve line for these unexpected emergencies. And based on history, I don't think your reserve ought to be bigger than about 40 or 50,000. And you're already above that, and you wanted to add 19. That's where I'm stuck. But it's because I think your board is planning for sort of the worst case, even though we haven't seen that in 20 years, and they're not aware that the county would be willing to back them up if we ever did have that kind of I'd call it.
Well, I'll put together a meeting and invite 1 or 2 or 3 or all of you to it too. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I want to say this as politely, as tactfully as I can. That's not how it works. We decide what gets approved as a budget.
Oh, I understand that.
And I'm hearing 2 voices saying, we think that you're overtaxing. Maybe 3 voices, I don't know. So maybe what we do is we go ahead and move to a motion, and I can either vote no or offer a friendly amendment to adjust for 2019. But I think the $19,618 ad should not be included in this budget, and that the pest board should be asked to reconvene and consider what the proper assessment is going forward based on those numbers. Or we can just decline it altogether, and the pest board can meet and take up our advice. And I guess the third option is we can simply set the budget for them, which is really statutorily what our obligation is, our responsibility.
I think I'd like to have it sent back to their board and bring us back a cleaner copy.
Okay. Keith, would you mind taking a couple of notes, because I'm I'm agreeing with Commissioner Cook, and that represents the majority of the board. Commissioner Miller, are you comfortable with this?
I'm fine with that. It's
Okay,
one of the two options I would go with.
then I would ask that when it goes back that, one, what we get for the next budget actually have prior year numbers. In fact, I think I'd like to see a 3-year window, the current 2019, the 18, and the 17, so that we can see trend data. 2, I'd like to see a reserve line added in the budget instead of putting those emergency funds into professional services. And given that there's no desire on the board's part to further build this reserve fund, anticipating a significant reduction in the assessment. Mr. Wilson, I know you were estimating, but you said probably go from 4 to 3, so we'd like to see what the effect is on the assessments by not including that bump in the professional services line. I think the rest of it I could live with. What's the feeling of the board? Is there anything in that scenario that you'd like to change?
I think that should bring us forward.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. Commissioner Beck.
Tom, I'd like to offer that if your board would send us the budget ahead of the assessments each year, and I know that might change when you have to meet or something, but you'd be able to provide this feedback ahead of time. And or if you want to meet with Keith ahead of time, he could give you a pretty good idea where the board's going to be on budgets.
This is ahead of time, though. This is for 2019.
Yeah, but you've already set your assessment, set your budget, and everybody's out of town, so unless you call a special meeting, this is after the fact. So you've already said that you'd be willing to do a special meeting, so that'd be great. That'll give you an opportunity to update this budget, reduce that assessment on a per acre basis, create a proper reserve line, give us the trend history so that we can see how things are going. I would hope that no one misconstrues the comments today as not being supportive of the PES board. We think what you do is extremely important, but I think we can do it on a more austere budget and without over-assessing growers.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
At least the chair was soft.
That's right. Commissioner Miller was hard on me. Okay, well, that was supposed to take about 3 minutes. The board's got a responsibility to review these things in detail and not just approve them, so I think we've done our duty. Next item is Washington State University Extension 4H faculty vacancy, and I understand that Gaffney's here this morning. Yeah, thank you. Tim, you're welcome too. Always. Sorry for the delay, but if anybody appreciates the need for a test budget, probably you do.
And the need for appropriate deliberation. That's part and parcel of our organizational structure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear this morning and for putting me early on the agenda. I appreciate both of those things. As you heard, my name is Mike Gaffney. I frankly don't remember whether any of you were participants in the meeting I had in March with the Wasatch Policy Council. I gave an update to that group on the status of the WSU budget and its impacts on extension. And I'd like to start with that, if I may, and then talk a bit about this position. The news is somewhat better than it was in March when I talked to that group. And I know if you've been following the news at all, you have some sense of what's been going on at WSU. When our new president took office in summer of 2016, the first thing he did was impose a new budgeting regime on WSU that was, frankly, needed, necessary, and although painful, good for us. In the process of implementing that budgeting regime at the central level, the university discovered what now has become pretty commonly known and talked about considerably in the press, that we had about a $30 million operating deficit we'd been spending against reserves for several years. And our president put us on an austerity program that was designed to resolve that deficit in budget over a 3-year period. It started with a one-time budget reduction in that fiscal year 17 cycle, and then we're just starting the second of 3 years on a program that is designed to save $10 million a year each year for 3 years. And that translated in our College of Agriculture, Human and Natural Resource Sciences, into a pretty deliberate program that our former acting dean, Ron Mindelhammer, acknowledged was not strategic, but was effective, and that was to rely on attrition, particularly incentivized attrition, along with natural attrition amongst primarily our faculty ranks, to create open positions, the salary savings from which could be used to meet those required budget reductions. And as a college and as an extension organization, we were perhaps more successful at that than we with hindsight, could have been. Extension, if you go back 2 fiscal years and include this one, so fiscal years 17, 18, and the current fiscal year 19, Extension will have realized about a $1.2 million savings in current expenditures annually, almost entirely based on attrition, the creation and maintenance of empty positions, the salary savings from which meet those budget reductions. The primary impact on that, the focus on incentivized retirement in particular, was on our faculty ranks rather than our non-faculty administrative, professional, and classified ranks. As you might imagine, that has impacted our system pretty substantially. What I said in March was that we had been given a mandate to explore structural options for extension that would make us more efficient in the future, to look at smarter ways of doing business, and to look at further reductions. Since then, as we go through these sequential budgeting processes, and as we've done a hard look at where we started and what has happened to us over those 2.5 years, it became clear that the conversation really is not how much smaller do we need to get, but how do we cope with how small we already are. And that conversation has continued. In March, I talked about a mandate to change, and currently, really, it's a recognition that necessity has forced us to change already, and that dovetails with that mandate, which we still have from central leadership to become more efficient and recognize that we're a leaner organization. For example, I'll show you something I used to brief our new dean when he came on board in June, and it's a map that shows our 40 locations across the state, 39 counties and 1 tribal extension office. Now, we also have presence in 14 other locations, 54 total. But in those 40, we have or anticipate that we'll have 19 that are not served by a single faculty county director position, that have either a joint assignment or an acting assignment or a temporary assignment or are currently vacant or will be. That's just an example of the impact that we've had on the extension system statewide over the last couple of years. Now, as I said, we've got a new dean in place in the college, and that has given us a bit of redirection and has changed the timeline for us on this effort to redefine extension, adjust to what has already happened to us out of necessity, and bring some new sense of order to the statewide system. In support of that, we've articulated principles that will be familiar to you, but that I think are worth repeating in this context. The first is that it is our firm first principle that we will continue to honor the partnerships we have with our county partners across the state, continue our presence in each county, and not just continue but expand the services that we offer in each county. The trick is how we continue and expand those services in a reduced budget climate. But we also recognize that we have opportunity to leverage in more effective ways the system we have and new partners, and we're exploring both of those. How that applies here is we've done a lot of hard looking at how we make use of our faculty in extension. We've got about 103 faculty members spread out across the state. Many of them supported in part, as is the case here for 3 faculty members, by contributions from our county partners. Statewide, Extension receives about just short of $11 million in support from our 39 county partners. About half of that is in kind. Slightly less than half of that is direct monetary contributions to our operations. And we're mindful that is not just for Extension but for the university a significant contribution, and a system that has served us all well, Extension, WSU, and our county partners for slightly more than 100 years now. So we're very keen to do nothing to disrupt that, and rather to expand that as we can, as we're learning how to be more efficient and more effective about what we do. So we see the principal faculty roles loosely defined or philosophically defined as first and foremost to be the vehicle by which we maintain our unique status as the organization that provides research-based programming and services. Second, to be the responsible people for maintaining program quality, fidelity to principles, and efficacy in delivery. And then third, to serve as a stronger linkage with the other programmatic and project resources that are available through the university, and that's something we're exploring right now. So how can Extension be more of a linkage point, a conduit point to the university as a whole rather than a deliverer of simply Extension services? You'll hear more about that as we move into this process. How that has translated here is that statewide we've been looking at how to maximize the value of our reduced faculty ranks, and how to enhance, because really the focus at the university level and at the college level has been on faculty, not on what you would think of as support staff. Now, I'm not doing justice to our administrative professional staff to call them support staff. Many of them operate independently and deliver services really at what we would expect to be the faculty level. They simply don't have an expectation of scholarship and advancement that is part of the faculty picture. And so we're looking at how we expand the tier structure, if you will. Can we strategically place support staff in places, and then strategically position faculty to manage those support staff, and thereby maintain and expand our services with a reduced faculty load, or reduced faculty population. The goal is not just to adjust to smaller faculty ranks, but to maintain and increase our presence in our services. What that translates to actually is a stronger support for adding support positions, administrative, professional, and classified staff positions, than we currently have for adding or replacing faculty. We still are under pretty rigorous standards for replacement of faculty, or especially for new hires. System-wide, Extension has lost more than 20 faculty in the last 2.5 years, and our hiring plan, as approved by the provost, approved 4 replacement hires for this fiscal year. Again, recognizing that it is those vacant positions that generate the positive cash flow that help the university with this budget situation. The good news is that one of those hires is here. And so of the 4 that Extension got approved, and at the college level, that's 4 of 12 for the College of Ag, Human and Natural Resource Sciences. But at the time that we were getting that approved and examining what a position description would look like, the 2 program leaders, and I wear 3 hats in Extension these days. You may know that Extension is organized into 3 program units. Principal units for the way we manage faculty and staff. There are also the tenure and promotion homes for our faculty. Agriculture and natural resources, youth and families, and my unit, that's one of my 3 hats, community and economic development. And the 2 program leaders for youth and family, which manages the 4-H program, and agricultural and natural resources, which manages the Master Gardener program, came to me as part of this process as we were trying to define the faculty position that we got permission to fill here, and suggested to me what I think is a bright idea, and which I approved. And that is to look at elevating the expectations of that faculty member to program management, program fidelity, responsibility for translation of research to delivery, and to rely on an increased support structure for actual delivery of programming activity. So what we have put together is a faculty position that actually has responsibility in this region for both 4-H and Master Gardener, but that is supported by administrative professional positions in each of those 2 categories for the delivery of services. And we are in an active search for that position as we speak. Now, my sense in talking this over with Doreen Hauser-Lindstrom, who leads Youth and Family, and Todd Murray, who leads Ag and Natural Resources, is that this may be the future for us as we have faculty positions come up elsewhere. Whether it's in this specific structure or a recognition that faculty are best used in our system at a level that may be better supported by folks who have direct responsibility for program delivery, so that faculty can provide oversight, content, program fidelity, and the linkage to the research, again, that I think sets us apart from others that are providing some of the same services we provide. So again, our goal here is actually to provide better service for the county and the region through this structure. It is a bit of a departure from the structure we had in place. It's a part of a reflection of the fact that we are short both in 4-H and in Master Gardener, and an effort on our part to address both of those shortfalls in ways that will benefit Franklin County and the region. So I want to give you that background and the status update on this. Happy to respond to questions and or tag Tim to answer the hard ones.
Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Miller.
So you're going to add 20 hours a week onto your workload, Tim?
Hopefully not.
That's not the plan.
What I heard was that the nature and character of your duties would change, not your schedule, or your location, or your compensation.
Yeah, that's pretty much the standard.
Okay.
Mike has 3 jobs and gets 1 check, so.
Yeah.
So if I could add a comment, so in Natalie's absence, I have filled in a little bit with some administration of 4-H, but the program support person that we hired has been doing most of the day-to-day duties, which was kind of the idea of hiring that person, let them do some of the major trainings and day-to-day functions of 4-H, and then have a faculty member that does some more kind of exploratory projects and tries to expand the program. And so what we're really hoping with this position is that we get some synergy between the 2 volunteer programs and have somebody that kind of provides more, tries to make those connections and get those things working together in the community, and also is more entrepreneurial in procuring outside funding to expand programming. So we want to keep the good programming that we have in place now, and then work on some synergistic activities and additional grant money where we can expand opportunities. So that's one of the hopes that we look for with this position, is get somebody that can step in and provide that type of leadership.
Tim, were you just speaking to the volunteers or the admin professionals?
I was speaking to the faculty member, I think is what I was trying to aim the comments towards. That faculty member would provide that guidance. And then the synergistic activities would be between the program coordinators, coordinating staff, and then the volunteers themselves also. So they're two of the biggest, the Master Gardener and 4-H volunteer programs that we have in the state or in Benton and Franklin counties. So there's a lot of opportunities and connections that are occurring there currently.
Didn't catch that the first time. So the admin professionals that were referred to, sounds like historically had a narrower scope than they're going to have now, and that they're really going to expand kind of into an admin professional / program specialist, and they're going to be the direct oversight of what is largely a volunteer cadre in these programs.
Yeah, that's the general idea. And so in Franklin County, as you guys know, we've had the program support person in place on a part-time basis, and then more recently on a full-time basis. And then in Benton County, they recently hired an analogous position over the Master Gardener program. So we've got support coming in from Franklin and Benton County for these program support specialists, and we'd like to have faculty oversight. And since we can't have two, we want one great person to do it.
Perfectly said. Thanks.
Like from WSU standpoint, if we were to join another county or two into this program, we could get real mileage out of Tim.
We are talking to some county groups. Probably not a secret that we've had some conversations with Lewis, Cowlitz, Pacific in particular, about whether there's an opportunity for a more regional focus, and we are open to those conversations. We probably should not include Tim in that, since it'll affect him directly. But
Well, I think our board would probably tell you, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong, that we've been real pleased with the service Tim has provided, and understand he's got his hands full. But if there are counties that are looking to combine and have reservations about that, feel free to send them our way.
Thank you. I appreciate
We'll
that.
tell you it works for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the update. Any other questions?
Just appreciate Tim's work in Franklin County. And
Thank you. Not a surprise to hear about that, but it's good to hear it. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. I just thought it'd be useful in the budget, so you guys would make the explanation easier when we come in there.
yeah.
Brought in the big hitter to make the explanation easier.
Yeah, well, all of this, of course, is contingent on something you and I talk about every time we meet, right? You know what that is?
Yes, I remember.
Okay. I think they're growing them up north somewhere. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you, Mike.
Thank you. I don't know if you recall, a couple of years ago, he brought us a sample of a Cosmic Crisp apple. He thought he needed to find some more of those.
Yeah.
He's a talented guy, but I'm not sure that's ranking very high on his.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Of course, you got to bring enough for the whole class and anticipate that all the chairs will be full that day.
I think the boss will get us there.
Yeah.
Okay, next item this morning is a conditional use permit, CUP 2018-02. And I understand this is going to be presented by Nicole Stickney from our, we like to say from our planning staff. It's actually AHBL Personal Services, but that's only because we haven't talked her into staying permanently yet. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Before I begin, just a little refresher. The two items next on the agenda are both quasi-judicial items. They're both conditional use permits. I just wanted to remind you that these involve legal rights of specific identifiable parties, and that it's part of the due process for the parties that are involved. And the decision today would be based on the record that was developed at the hearing that the Planning Commission held. So the items that are important to remember is that this has all been subject to notice requirements. Timely and sufficient notice has been done. Quasi-judicial hearings must be subject to the appearance of fairness doctrine, and the decision would be based on the record. And looking in the Title 17 zoning for Franklin County, we did verify that unless a proper and timely appeal is filed, which did not take place, there's been no appeals on these, or if the board by majority vote deems further review is necessary, the action today is that the recommendation of the Planning Commission shall be effected by proper action of the board without further review. So if for some reason you feel like further review is warranted, what we would need to do is postpone any further deliberation so that you could, we could schedule a appeal closed record hearing for a future date, which would require notification and everything to take place before that proceeded.
So, for clarity,
Yes.
You said for further review, that would be to bring in additional information that's not currently in the record. The options before the board today would be to approve or decline the package before us.
If you decide to not approve, if you decide to go against the recommendation of the Planning Commission, you would not be able to do that today because we have not provided notification of an appeal hearing which would take place. If that's the direction the board thinks they're going to go, we would need to schedule an appeal hearing for a future date.
Well, I don't want to presuppose where the board may or may not go.
Right.
Just clarifying so that all the players know exactly what the options are. The options are to approve as presented or to fill in the right language.
Postpone action so that we can conduct a closed record appeal hearing at a future Board of County Commissioners meeting. Those are the procedural options.
Okay. Everybody clear on that?
I think so.
Approve as presented or move to a second proceeding for a closed record hearing. Okay?
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to...
Well, it's important because these, in my experience, these are matters, and I go to a lot of different board meetings, different places, and frankly, I see a number of places where they don't always get it right, and all the parties have a right to know what the law requires, and we have an obligation to make sure we follow it, so that is helpful.
Okay, great. So the first item that I'm presenting on today is conditional...
Would you go see if you can do something about that, please?
It's a conditional use permit. File number is CUP 2018-02, and the SEPA file number was 2018-09. It's a conditional use permit application to allow the construction and use of a proposed accessory building or shop, which would exceed the maximum allowed space for square footage and building height in the RS20 zoning district. So the proposed building by Mr. Gates, who's here today, would be 3,024 square feet in size, and the proposed average roof height would be 19 feet and 6 inches. And deviations to these limitations are allowed through the conditional use permit process. So we took in the application and reviewed it. And this was presented to the Planning Commission with a written recommendation of approval at their meeting on August 28, 2018.
And deviations are allowed but not guaranteed?
Not guaranteed. It has to go through the hearing process to allow for public input, agency review, and so forth.
Just making sure everybody's staying on the same page.
Yes. So on that date, the Planning Commission held a open record public hearing, which we had fully advertised for, and they passed a motion. It was 4-2 to forward the board with the recommendation of approval based on 6 findings of fact and 9 suggested conditions of approval. Following the meeting, I think 2 days later, we dispatched letters out to the applicant and all of the parties of record. So we sent out a letter to anyone who had written in or made comment at our public hearing that we held to let them know about the outcome of the Planning Commission's recommendation and to let them know about the appeal process so that they had an opportunity to appeal at that time if they felt aggrieved by the recommendation, and no appeals were received. So that's why it's before you today.
And their other option, absent an appeal, is to provide input to the Planning Commission to become part of their package that comes to us.
Well, that had already occurred at that point.
But those are the options
Yes.
for input, is that or an appeal.
Those were the folks who had made comment were considered then parties of record and had standing to appeal the decision if they wanted to. And there were 4 people who spoke or wrote in opposition to the proposal. So what I have provided for you today is a proposed resolution. If you want to move forward going with the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve this conditional use permit. And you've received the full packet, which shows the record, including the draft minutes from the Planning Commission's meetings, that you can see how the proceedings were, and all of the information that was provided to the Planning Commission has been packaged for you. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioners?
And after the notification of the people of contact, there was no appeal notice or any negativity from after the fact?
I have not heard anything further from the folks who spoke or wrote in following the hearing. It was just a one-way communication. We sent out a letter saying, here's your options for appeal, and we didn't hear anything back in response.
So there's an option for, an option for appeal of the Planning Commission's recommendation. Speak to any opportunities for appeal of this board's decision.
Any decisions by this board would be appealed to the court.
Okay.
Yeah.
So someone expressing opposition early in the process who chooses not to appeal the Planning Commission's recommendation for whatever reasons they may have, cost, timing, whatever, still has the option to appeal this board's decision. I wanted that to be clear and part of the record.
Yes, it would be part of the state local planning review act.
Right.
And so there'd be a limited time period, but they could bring it to court if they so chose to.
And just speaking to the fact that if someone didn't appeal the Planning Commission recommendation, I don't think we ought to weigh heavily one way or another or try to read what their intent is. It's simply a fact.
And will these people be notified after this board meeting of the decision?
No, we don't do any further notification. We're not
Okay.
required to.
Okay.
Mr. Miller?
Well, I'm trying to get my web to come up because I read it and I don't,
Well, while you're working on that, do you mind if I go ahead?
yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. Here's the package. It
Yeah,
might be
let's do
helpful.
that.
That doesn't have the complete Planning Commission record in it. You mentioned that there were 4 people that expressed opposition. Is it in the record and therefore in the information that we're to consider today whether or not these are nearby or adjacent properties?
They all stated their address for the record. I don't know the proximity to the home. Some people described, oh, this is, right behind me, that sort of thing. But I never mapped out where they reside. We do notify everyone within 500 feet of the subject property when it's inside the urban growth area.
So of the 4, you said at least one identified that they were close by?
Yes, as I recall. I'll quote the minutes now.
I recall that from the record as well. I just didn't know about the others.
So I was expecting the map or something up there like we usually have. Also, if this doesn't work, but all I see is a sketch on this one. Maybe you can fill it in a little bit right now on the development and how many, what is the situation on the, please just give the details.
So the property is located in the Archer Estate subdivision. Let me see here.
Now, that would be the one to the east of Dent and to the north of Burns.
I believe so. Yeah.
Matt's nodding yes.
It's been out there, but it's not necessarily defined in my mind. I did do a site visit out there. Just to clarify, out in the RS20 zoning district, we allow accessory buildings to be constructed. It's based on the square footage of the existing home, attached garage, and if there's a covered patio, we include that too. So there's an actual calculation that's done. What the applicant is proposing is actually 284 square feet above what he'd be able to do outright. So that's the difference. And then also it's a little bit higher in height. The height is 18 feet.
CUP is basically for 200 plus feet and a foot and a half height.
Yeah, about a foot and a half height, almost 300 square feet additional beyond what he'd be able to do.
You say 284 square feet?
Uh-huh.
So basically a 10 by 28.
Yeah.
Okay.
Above the normal.
Is this
area.
a single story, or is there a second story where footage, that footage is the footprint, right?
It's always the footprint, and in this
Okay.
case, the home is on one story.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear. I didn't see anything in the record about whether or not there was interior space footage, so this is just all footprint. So it'd be an extra 280 square feet of footprint.
Onto
Right.
the accessory structure, correct.
So I noticed in the record that it said that the setback on the side of the structure would be 10 feet, and then it referred to setback in the back as a minimum of 10 feet. Was there a reason that there was a differentiation made there, that they weren't both minimum 10? The reason I ask is I thought maybe that that 10 foot on the side was a hard number to maybe leave room for a drain field or something. So it's just grammatical.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, that speaks to the issue of how close it is to a property line and therefore the apparent size from an adjoining property. Basis for the question. If any of us get into anything that is not properly part of the record, I'm going to invite you to stop us because we want to make sure we stay well within the boundaries of everybody's rights. The code provides for what is automatically allowed. The conditional use permit is for circumstances where somebody wants to do something above and beyond or different. And it's separated out as a conditional use permit so that it gets additional scrutiny for potential impacts on the environment, all the things covered in SEPA, which would include nearby and adjacent properties.
Yes, that's correct. There's a procedural element to what we're doing, and then there's also that opportunity to mitigate if there are reasons to do that in order to allow the CUP to go through based on impacts.
Especially on SEPA issues.
Correct.
I would think. Okay. I bring that up just to clarify because not everyone is well familiar with conditional use permits and special use permits and why we use them and why they're necessary and so forth.
Yes, and all of the conditional use permits will always have a SEPA review, and that was conducted, and there is a separate appeal option under the SEPA decision, and no one appealed that. And there was we made a threshold determination. It was a determination of non-significance for this under the SEPA.
And that was non-significance for the SEPA items. And if you would, just by title, would you touch on what those SEPA elements are? Specifically looking for whether or not they speak to impacts on adjacent properties.
Yeah. One reason why I like the fact that we do go through SEPA, it's a requirement, but it's also helpful because it enhances the record and provides more additional information about what the applicant proposes to do. So SEPA, there's a checklist involved that the person must submit, and we go through that checklist. We augment answers if we need to. It's a full-scale environmental look. And in this case, through SEPA, there were certain answers that the applicant gave that are just not questions that we have on our application form. For example, he disclosed that this is not going to be used for business use, things like that. He also answered questions about, I'm trying to remember the things that were in the SEPA. there's environmental aspects, but, you go through all of the, what are the utilities provided, what are the different impacts on it. With a conditional use permit, many times we're looking at traffic impacts. And so we can ascertain that, this accessory building is not going to have any anticipated traffic impacts, things like that. So that's kind of where that lies.
Right. And no wetlands with endangered three-spine stickleback swimming around.
That's right. Yeah, looks at the critters, looks at all of those little details, yes.
Sure. So if the application were for 4 inches extra in height and 10 extra square feet, we'd still be going through the same process.
We would.
The process is the process, right? And likewise, if it were for 10 feet of extra height and 1,000 feet of extra footprint, same process.
That is correct.
I bring that up just to shed some light on the fact that as we go through this record, really I think it falls to us to look at the extent to which it extends into the CUP arena and try to assess a fair balance on impacts. Is that a reasonable? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Miller, did you get that running?
Yeah, it didn't help me any at all, because more likely what helped is we got a CUP, we got a conditional use permit. We set rules and guidelines for a reason. And then if someone comes along and wants us to stretch that, is it correct that we're infringing on other property rights sites right there, distance or whatever, because you have 4 complaints. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we do this, other people come along and do it also.
They would all be subject to their own review process. CUPs are looked on on a case-by-case basis, so you're not really setting any precedent per se, other than you've gone through the process in terms of your approval or disapproval.
Touching that, we wouldn't be setting any legal precedent. There wouldn't be any obligation for us to do this for another property, but there might be, take it out of the legal context, there might be an implied precedent in terms of the board's actions and fairness.
So what would stop us, why even have these CUPs, why even have these guidelines, if we can continue to approve CUPs, so what's right for one should be right for the other?
Well, each application is going to be unique in terms of the potential impacts, what the applicant is looking to do, and that's why we developed the findings of fact and recommended conditions of approval.
Right.
I would point out to a few things on this particular case. One is that the applicant, if this goes through, we've recommended that under a condition of approval they'll have to relocate the septic system reserve area, because there's a problem with that as they've proposed it. We have specified, this is in our code, but we did confirm that the accessory structure would have to be compatible both in roofing and siding materials, type, and color in relation to the primary home.
Doesn't that have to happen even if it's not
a CUP? It does,
CUP?
but we put it in here just to be very clear about that. We could have had some enhanced mitigation, that we didn't suggest that, but sometimes with a project like this, you might say, okay, if you want to do the bigger project, we want to see you put some extra vegetation as a buffer to screen it, or maybe you need an enhanced setback. Those are the things that can come about. Okay. In this case, we didn't propose any of those, but that's the sort of thing that you might expect to see with the CUP.
The line of questioning leads to what I was kind of wondering, and we've been through this enough that we have the idea, but just so everybody hears it. But when looking at the picture, it looks like the picture you're showing on there, it looked like a big shop with a couple of vehicles. If this is development, is that an eyesore?
Well, that's a subjective question, and so that's why we go through this process, I believe.
Okay, well, that's why I'm kind of bringing it out.
An eyesore without the garage.
Well, yeah, there's a vehicle sitting there. Could be.
If I can pick up there for a minute, and we'll come back and take as much time as you need. Along those same lines, the record speaks to, I don't know if they're CCRs, covenants, HOAs, what it is, but to be clear, all of that lies in the civil domain, and what they allow or don't allow really isn't part of our process, but again, it was brought up in the record, so it's something we can speak to. irrespective of what this board decides, whether we approve it or we go to a hearing, that is a separate remedy that an adjacent or somebody else in the area that feels that what's been done is not consistent with those covenants, they can take that up through their covenant process or through their homeowners association, whatever it is. And I understand that some homeowner associations are very strong and can enforce things and others are not. But I just wanted to sort of develop that awareness for the board that that's a separate matter. Question for you, Nicole, would be, is there any nexus or overlap between our process and those covenants? For example, if we knew that the covenants didn't allow anything above a certain height, is that something that would properly in a quasi-judicial process where that was addressed in the record, is that something that should be evaluated and considered, or should we keep that as an isolated process?
No, it's the county has the obligation to look at the zoning code and enforce the zoning code and these processes that we have in place. It is not the county's obligation to enforce CC&Rs as you discussed. And that was a long discussion we had at the Planning Commission too. And many of the Planning Commission members expressed that.
I apologize for the interruption, but I didn't say enforce, I said consider, and I think there's an important difference.
Sure, yeah. Either way, the county might be aware, we might be aware in the Planning and Building Department of CC&Rs, but there's a lot of times when we simply wouldn't be aware, and that's not in our duty to go through and look at that. Right. One example that I gave to the Planning Commission is, you know, CC&Rs can really cover anything. They can say you can only have a white picket fence.
Right. Right.
But the county, if we get a fence permit, we're not going to check and see. That's not in our purview. So the CC&Rs are separate civil matter, as you described.
Right. So let me approach it from the other side, just for full clarity. Mm-hmm. Is it inappropriate for the board to consider covenants from CC&Rs in the deliberation?
Yes, I think you would be.
Okay.
It would be hard to legally defend that consideration.
Okay. All right. And
this is a difficult matter, though, because I think property owners have certain expectations based on their understanding of processes. Right. So we just need to make it clear that if they feel aggrieved by a decision and it's in that arena of CC&Rs that they're concerned about, they need to take it up through those processes.
And understand, I'm asking these questions. I think I probably know the answers to them, but it's important for this to be in the record. It helps put light on the whole process so that other people that are looking at what we're doing understand the boundaries with which we have to operate. Okay. Commissioner Cook?
No, I think I have, with the information brought forward to us ahead of time and what Nicole has explained today, I'm ready to move for an approval.
Commissioner Miller, any other comments?
I'm just concerned about the 4 other people that there must be a reason why 4 people in one community, and we don't know where they're all located at, I guess. But you know, if they don't seem that we're in legal pursuit of this, to be able to do what we're planning on passing it, you know,
is there information in the record that I might not be recalling about the nature of the opposition from the 4 individuals? Since we don't have the full package in front of us to refer to.
Yes. So I have the minutes here. Basically, the testimony centered around, I'm going to try to get the verbiage right here, opposition based on CC&Rs not being adhered to. They had an expectation. One gentleman read from the CC&Rs. He said he was worried about property values. Another person said...
And candidly, I didn't recall seeing that, but it makes our previous discussion about CC&Rs that much more important and relevant.
Mm-hmm. So the draft minutes, which I provided, but...
So that was...
Did you get the draft minutes?
We did, in the read aheads. So that one you just spoke to was objecting on the basis that it violated CC&Rs, and we've already covered that that's outside our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
What about the other 3?
Not anticipating a structure of the size going up in the neighborhood. And against the building height, doesn't want anyone building a larger structure. If one is approved, will the next one be approved? And then the fourth person wrote in a letter, which is part of the record.
One of my questions,
This is yours.
before I really looked at the map, was if this was edging on waterfront property where the height would restrict visual, and looking at the map and knowing the area, it would not restrict a riverfront view or a mountain view or White Bluff view or where it's at. So I can't regard a height problem as far as
Another thing, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The accessory building height limitations is shorter than primary structures. So this isn't going to be taller than primary structures would be allowed to be. It's just that normally we keep the accessory structures at a lower height than the primary structures. If someone were to build a two-story house, it would far exceed this height. So that's maybe something else to kind of put in the framework of thinking about views and visual obstruction and the kind of impact of a additional structure on a lot. It's still shorter than houses could be built at.
Take a minute and look at this drawing in here. Have I got the right one? Yeah. So what I'm looking at is the drawing, this hand drawing.
Mm-hmm.
The terrain where this is, as I recall, is pretty flat in every direction for several hundred yards. Excuse me. One of the thoughts I had, like Commissioner Cook, was is it obscuring a view of a river, or is it obscuring a view of something else? And then the other thought was, if it were up against a hillside and you had an extra tall building on the other side, it could create kind of a canyon effect, right? Which could have an aesthetic impact on your property, which therefore could be considered a value proposition. It could reduce the value of the property. But this appears to be in a wide open flat area in pretty much every direction. The other observation is that on the northern boundary it's 72 feet, and on the eastern boundary it looks like it's 48 feet. That 48 feet, if that building were, what was the total, 284?
Right,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
extra amount that he would
So across that northern line, if the building were 3 feet shorter and the eastern borders 48 were 2 or 3 feet, it would represent that 280 square feet. So I'm just thinking about, now I'm not suggesting an alternate plan, that's not one of our options, but what I am looking at is from an aesthetic standpoint, if you got a building that's 72 feet long, would it be less objectionable if it was 69 feet? Would that be a significant difference? And if the other side, instead of being 48, was 46 or 45. So if you were talking about an extension that was 28 feet longer on one side and 10 feet deeper to make up that 284 square feet, that could have a very significant visual impact. But because the building is not long and thin, really a couple, 2-3 feet on either dimension accounts for that extra 284 square feet. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
It does to me. I'm just curious if it resonates with anybody else. I'm trying to imagine, if I'm an adjacent property owner, what does a compliant building 284 square feet smaller look like? How imposing is it compared to excuse me, this kind of a broad footprint with long dimensions on the two outer sides, right, the two sides that people observe? What's the effective difference if that was, say, 3 feet shorter? in terms of the visual and the aesthetic and the potential for an impact on property value.
I can't believe it would make a better difference.
Yeah.
I'd never noticed a difference.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think what really confuses me here is accessory building that is, exceeds the square footage, but is that what we're talking about, is only 200 feet more?
280.
Yeah, then I see, reading this, I thought it didn't have that number there, so as you go down, you have to figure that out. So, okay, by reading this, I did not see that difference. In discussion, I see that's what we're talking about. I don't think it makes a difference either, so I'm fine. I'm fine to pass it.
2, 5. So just by rough math, if this building, instead of 72 feet on the north side, was 69 feet, and instead of 48 feet on the east side, it was 45 feet. So 3 feet shorter on each of those outward dimensions. It would make a difference, I'm sure. The question is, and I think that's what we're weighing, is how imposing is it, how big a difference is that? If you made those two adjustments, that accounts for 252 of the 284 square feet.
Right. It's, yeah, and the height isn't relative because the height isn't, well,
Not
yeah,
interfering. But,
yeah, so,
but I don't think, did anybody on the floor opposition even talk about footprint? Was it basically the height?
They talked about the size of the structure in general terms. I can't recall if it was specific to one or the other.
So a general comment, our duty here obviously is to try and balance the interests of all the parties. And by approving a COP, we would be making an exception to our own zoning. That zoning was established for a purpose, and there's a variety of purposes, but one of them in there is to give some measure of certainty, although not guaranteed, of what surrounding development might look like. And because the CUP process is all public record, anyone who purchased in there had the right to know and the opportunity to know that CUPs are an option and can be approved, which is to say they're purchasing into an environment like that. There's no guarantee that somebody won't apply for a CUP or a variance or some other change. And if that were a complete secret, I might be of a slightly different mind, but the fact that these are, I think, a pretty well-known reality in developments, then it simply comes down to weighing how much of a change is it. Is there something in the record that you can speak to about maximum height for homes?
Yes, if I recall correctly, the primary structures can be up to 30 feet in height in RS20 zoning district.
Okay, and this we're looking at is 19 and a half?
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, you started to add something?
So just a reminder again, it's a little, the size of accessory structures, when we permit them, we always look at the size of the home. So even on an RS20 zoning district, his accessory structure could be allowed to be bigger than hers because he has more square footage to his house, and that's how the county has written the code.
Right.
So
yeah, the relative ratio thing I think was really clear in the record. The question is, for me at least, is if you're going to do a conditional use permit, now you're going above and beyond, and does that constitute a special, and this is almost rhetorical, but a special privilege at the expense of others, or that others don't get? And so let's take the second part of that first. Everyone is entitled to the same process, so we can cross that one off. Then it really is this an expansion that, or something beyond the zoning that is an unreasonable imposition on others? Recognizing, and I think this is a thing that often gets overlooked in CUP discussions, is if we were to, through whatever appropriate process, disallow this, it wouldn't automatically disallow anybody else in the neighborhood from doing it. It's all case by case. But it does impact, I think, a reasonable person's thinking about fairness and equity and how you might view the next one that comes along. So alternatively, or in the opposite If we were to approve it, you'd have the same dynamic, which is it sends a bit of a signal as to whether or not the county is open to things above and beyond the zoning. So the point being that this process, whether we intend it or not, will have the effect of sending a message to others in the development what the county's inclination is on these matters. So I'm sharing that more for perspective for my fellow commissioners than anything else.
And I have to agree, that's why I kind of did the question that I did, because
Right.
what are we opening up here?
Well, and to be clear, as Nicole pointed out, I think very appropriately, everyone is on a case-by-case. And the fact that theoretically, if we were to approve this one, the next one that came along would be on its own merits. And if it was a much smaller building, it wouldn't have, or home, it wouldn't have as big a shop opportunity. So the COP process is there, I think, in recognition of the fact that some things outside the basic of the zoning might be acceptable, but they require case-by-case review, and that's the whole purpose of the conditional use. So if we think that the infringement or possible infringement on other properties is of a level that fits within that gray zone and we'd be willing to do the same for others, then I think that's a basis for support. And if we don't think it is, then that's a basis for going the other way. Reasonable?
I would just add that there are suggested findings of fact, and those are based on, those are essentially the criteria on which you look at the merits of each CUP that comes in. Those are directly from the code. And so when
Are
you
there any
do...
in there that are not code standard in the conditions? Because obviously that's possible.
Yes, that is possible. Relocate the septic system reserve area on a site plan. That needs to be done because the reserve area must be 10 feet from any foundation or driveway.
But that's compliance with the health department
That is
and that standard, so that would be there on,
Yep.
everybody would have the same consideration.
Yep.
Okay.
Nothing else really special has been added in.
Okay. All right. I think I've had enough discussion for me. Anybody else have other questions, want to continue?
I would move for approval of CUP 2018-02 for positive recommendation with the 6 findings of fact and 9 conditions of approval.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, I'm going to use this document for a minute. Okay, so we have a, let's see, Commissioner Cook, did you make your motion based on the resolution or the CUP number? I didn't catch it. I think you said 2018-02, right?
I did the CUP, yes.
Okay, well, either one's fine. I just wanted to make sure I recited it correctly. All right, so we have a motion and second for approval of CUP 2018-02 as presented. Is there other discussion or comments before we move to voting? Okay, hearing none from my fellow commissioners, I'll just offer that, at least for me, this is one of the tougher things we do, because I know this board and I know that we are all keenly supportive of the notion of the lawful enjoyment of people's property rights, and we don't like telling people what they can and can't do with their private property. And we obviously have to weigh that against the potential impacts of other properties. And at least for me, it comes down to, I don't want to, I think, needlessly constrain, at least from the appearance standpoint, the opportunity of other owners and developments to undertake CUP actions. I don't want to send that message, and so it kind of comes down for me for a tie, and the tiebreaker is I don't want us to send a message that we are trying to be overly constraining or regulatory. So that's my comment. Last call for comments before we vote. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so it's been approved. The signature would suggest I don't know how to spell my last name, but my pen ran out of ink. Okay, moving on. I promise this next one will be easier.
Me too.
Should be pretty straightforward.
This is conditional use permit CUP 2018-03, Big Bend Electrical Cooperative. I know the commissioners all got read-aheads and read them thoroughly. And if there's no objection from the board, I would ask Nicole to abbreviate her comments, and we'll move into discussion quickly.
Okay.
So, brief comments of introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a proposed electrical substation by Big Bend Electric Cooperative. It's just on the border of Franklin and Adams County. It's at 20 Radar Hill Road in Othello. This property is zoned RR5, and it's a real remote area in the comprehensive plan. Basically, what they want to do is tear down an existing structure, put up an electrical substation. You have a site plan showing the layout. We don't have any special recommended conditions. We did recommend approval at the Planning Commission. They unanimously passed a motion to recommend approval based on 6 findings of fact with 9 suggested conditions of approval, and also for this one there were no appeals.
And any expressed opposition from any parties?
There was no expressed opposition. We did a full 1 mile radius notification. We also notified Adams County Planning Department.
Okay.
I've been waiting a long time to say this. I don't have any comments.
If there's no comments, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the CUP 2018-03 and SEPA 218-10. And this is Big Bend Electrical, proposes to construct electrical substation on parcel 120-040-535.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for approval of CUP 2018-03 and the concurrent SEPA documents. Any other further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. And I think I'll be back next week to more items.
Well, we'd like to see you here every week for several years, but that's
Thank you.
just a continuing push to get you to join the team permanently, that's all. Okay, next item on the agenda this morning is public comment. We're well past the time for that, but I think for good reason. Anyone in the public wishing to comment or speak with the board, this would be an opportunity. Okay, not seeing any offer or any interest in that right now. We'll move on to office business.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 fund expenditures and payroll in front of us this morning. Fund expenditures, 11 miscellaneous, Franklin County Reserve, auditor O&M, ending homelessness, etc. Bottom line of those items is $720,852.09. And Keith has viewed them, and Mr. Beaton approved them, and audited by Rosa Gomez.
And second.
Okay, motion and second for approval of fund expenditures as presented. Comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those are approved.
Second and final is county road and motor vehicle payroll. Bottom line of those 2 items is $155,108.92. And again, Mr. Beaton has approved it and was prepared by Raul.
And second.
Okay, motion and second for approval of county road and motor vehicle in the amount of was $155,108.52. 92 cents. 92 cents. Okay. Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those are approved as well. All right. Next item is the consent agenda. There are 6 items today. Are there any items on here that any commissioner wishes to separate for separate consideration? Okay, not hearing any. We'll entertain a motion for approval?
Yeah, move to approve consent agenda 1 through 6.
Second.
Okay, motion second for approval of the consent agenda is presented, items 1 through 6. Are there any comments or questions on any of these items?
Well, I'm just been through here again. The Wi-Fi doesn't work up here well, so I have to go to my data. But looking at what's the cost of the Wesley Group?
42, I think.
How much? 42? That's what I
I
thought.
think I remember.
That's what I saw. 4,000 earlier. 4,000 per month. 12 months. 48,000 a year. Okay, so 48,000. So it's $4,000 per month for 12 months. Okay, 48,000 is what I thought.
So I've got a couple of comments, questions. Commissioner Miller, if you think of others, we can come back to you in a minute. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, on the Wesley contract, for those listening, I'm speaking to Ms. Nave in the audience, our HR director. We have been waiting for some time for a decision from PERC on the matter up in Lincoln County, and their decision appears to make the process of union negotiations, in my view at least, as complicated, if not more complicated, than they were previously. Had we moved to a scenario where the process was going to be cleaner and simpler, Mr. Wesley's services might not have been quite as necessary as previous, but given the new environment, I think for the upcoming year with the PERC weighing in, I think it probably is warranted. Carly, your FTE count is going to go down a half FTE to fund this. Is that what I heard? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. No, she says no. Would it be fair to say that your current FTE count is lighter than it would be without Mr. Wesley's involvement?
I think that's accurate.
Okay, you think that's accurate?
Yes.
All right, I'm just trying to get that in the record. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, somebody would have to do the work.
Somebody would have to do the work,
Yes.
right. And you don't have anybody just sitting around that could do that?
No.
Okay. Just checking. Just checking. Okay, and the other question or comment I had was on Potts and Associates. We have used them for a number of years. I note that this is also a one-year contract. I appreciate that. I think year-to-year is the way to go with this. I'm not aware of any prohibition, and anybody that is, please speak up, but if we felt for some reason we needed additional service in this area, there's nothing that prohibits us from contracting with someone else. And in fact, if we were inclined in a future year to make a transition, having a year with both of them working together might actually be smart. I don't have a plan in mind. I'm not advocating that now. I'm just saying that we need to have somebody there representing us, and I think this represents sort of the minimum level of engagement and cost. So those are my comments. So we have a motion and a second for the 6 items in the consent. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Administration and office business. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item for your consideration, I sent you a draft of a letter by email earlier, a letter to the Secretary of Interior regarding support for the second phase of the Columbia Basin project. I don't know if you had a chance to review that, or if you'd still like to have editorial input to the letter. We've still got some time before it's time sensitive. I understand there's some meetings in Washington, D.C. that are scheduled to take place on the 8th, and Representative Dye would like to have this in her possession before she departs for that meeting.
Do you know if other counties are doing a similar or identical letter?
They have been requested to do so. I have not seen copies of those letters or whether they've actually responded to them. I would anticipate that most of them will.
It's the 4 counties, if I remember right, Lincoln, Grant, Adams, and Franklin.
Right.
You are correct, and
Do you have a copy of that letter?
you are correct. So 4 counties are interested in the Odessa project, which is touches Franklin County.
Well, this is more of the Bureau of Rec, it's not
Right, but it's the same, it's for the
Low,
project.
East Low.
It's to get money to play over, to finish up that project, starting to, what will affect Connie in the future.
Yeah, it's just a matter of going back there and trying to twist their arms to finish
Right.
the Bureau of Reclamation original plans were, what, 87,000 or 83,000 acres.
Yeah. So my only comment on this one is that something of this magnitude, if you want to move the needle at all in D.C., and I'm not convinced that a letter from a county is going to do that, but if it were, I think it's important that the 4 counties have individually authored letters that touch on different messages. Otherwise, it just starts to look like a phone bank by letter. Alternatively, I'd prefer to see one well-written letter with all the counties signing on. I actually prefer that because you've got very consistent messages and you show community support, and it doesn't look like somebody just farmed out a stock letter. But that being said, the content of the letter is fine with me. I'm not opposed to supporting it, and I would actually prefer that if Representative Dye was inclined to send one letter with a signature page from each county, which is still achievable. So that would be my recommendation, but I'm happy to support it this way as well. So what's the rest of the board think?
I can follow your thinking there as far as a consorted letter of support.
And, it's not clear the way that this is drafted, whether it's a chair signature, but I'd prefer to have, if we go with our own letter, I'd prefer to have all 3 commissioner names on here. Any objection to that? Okay. So, Keith, I think the answer is please contact Representative Dye and tell her we'd like to see a letter like this with a signature page from each county. If they don't want to do that, then we'd be willing to sign one, all 3 commissioners.
Very good.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
Okay. Other business?
Yeah, one other item. We've received a signed MOU or approved MOU from the Walla Walla District of the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the placement of a gate on Columbia River Road. I don't have that as an official resolution.
So the board has previously discussed it and gave consensus, at least, to move forward with it. We're just waiting. I was waiting for input from the prosecutor's office on any legal concerns, and I know there were some additions that needed to be made. Have we heard back on that?
I understood from Jen Johnson that this latest copy was legally sufficient.
The one that we provided, the Corps provided to us and we sent to the PA's office, or did they send us an updated one? Because if they sent us an updated one, I think I missed it.
Okay.
Okay.
I need to find out where I received this from, and I thought I got it from you, but I may be mistaken.
Well, you did get it from me, but it was the draft that the Corps sent, and in the same email, I sent it to several different folks, including the PA's office, asking for a legal review. And I got an initial note back from somebody in the PA's office. I'll go back and look, but it was a requirement for some additional language in there. And so I have those emails, and you and I can get together this week and bring that back next week. Coincidentally, during the meeting, I got a phone call from Kai Carpenter, who is the park ranger for this area with the Corps of Engineers. I'm sure checking on the status, they want to get it going. We could accelerate the process if the board wanted to delegate that authority to the chair to finish the agreement and sign. But that's up to the rest of the board. Okay. Not hearing a lot of enthusiasm for that idea. We'll bring it back next week, and we'll tell the Corps that if the ground frosts, they'll build it next year.
That's all I have in the way of administrative office business, but I do have 2 requests for executive sessions.
Okay. Public comment? Anybody? Okay. Not seeing any. There's 2 executive sessions you said that you'd like to have. I think this is probably as good a time as any. I'll just tag on your administrative office business and give a very quick update on the Veterans Advisory Board. We had, I think it's our 3rd meeting now, last evening. The board has consulted with Human Services. We have learned a few things. One, that Benton County, and I reported this earlier, is providing ministerial, managerial, financial, administrative support to Benton County's Veterans Assistance Program, and there is no, and this is the new part, there is no MOU or agreement or contract for those services. They've just been providing them out of the Human Services resource pool. And so you're going to see gives me a recommendation from the Veterans Advisory Board that we do exactly the same thing. I've talked with Kyle Sullivan, and he's noted that, probably is a collection of services that should be under some sort of agreement, both with Benton and Franklin, so I see that as the future. Yeah. A good deal of work has been done in terms of identifying an organization structure, the frontline organizations to provide the materials to veterans in need, a draft of the handout materials that will be used to direct veterans in a very concise, clean format, and arrangements with a local printing company to donate some of those design services. And I think that's it for now. The next thing I anticipate you'll see probably is Mr. Halterman, the current chair of the Veterans Advisory Board, coming in to be on the agenda and brief the board on where they are and their advice and recommendations, keeping in mind that while I've been attending, I started out being heavily involved, and I have pulled back so that they become truly an advisory board, and they will be increasingly independent in becoming in and advising the board on how they think we ought to operate the Veterans Assistance Program. Any questions on that rather rough summary? Okay. All right, that being the case, then we're on to executive sessions. Anybody anticipate any action required by the board as a result of these executive sessions? No. Okay, no actions expected afterward. We'll leave open the possibility that it might be, but it's not anticipated, and we do that in case there's anyone who doesn't wish to wait around to find out. So with that, if you would please introduce the first executive session that you need. Tell us who you need here and so forth.
Yes, I would request an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, paragraph I, to discuss with legal counsel the matter regarding against enforcement actions with litigation or potential litigation. I request that myself, the commissioners, Jen Johnson from the prosecutor's office, and Carly Nave from Human Resources be participants. Up to 20 minutes.
Okay, it'll take a minute or two to get the door closed, so we'll go into executive session at approximately 10:58, and that'll be for up to 20? Up to 20 minutes. I see Commissioner Cook is way ahead of us. He already has his clock set. Okay, we completed our first of 2 executive sessions. Clock says 11:16. We came out just a little bit early. Took a minute or two to get the door open, but we need to go right back into executive session. This will be our second and final one anticipated today. And Mr. Johnson, maybe you can tell us RCW title and length of time?
Yes, sir, thank you. I would request an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph D, review negotiations on performance of publicly bid contracts. Is that the right?
I don't think that's the right one we usually use. There's one specifically.
Oh, I'm sorry. Down the bottom. Let me correct that. Under RCW 42.30.140, paragraph 4, contract negotiations.
How much time?
How much time?
Probably 20 minutes. I think we can handle this in 20 minutes.
Okay, we'll go into executive session for the RCW and purpose stated at 11:18. The door is closed. The right people are here, so let's go ahead and turn off the recording and up to 20 minutes. Okay, it is approximately 11:39. We've completed our second of 2 executive sessions today. No action taken, of course, in executive session. Don't have any other agenda items for the schedule today, so before we adjourn, I'll just ask if there's any comments from Mr. Johnson. Anything else that needs to be addressed in open session?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Miller, anything else to add before we adjourn?
I'll be at Transportation Improvement Board from Thursday and Friday, so.
I will also be out of the office Thursday, Friday, but I'll have my phone. I'm not leaving town, so I'll be available.
Yeah.
So I just won't be.
Okay. Commissioner Miller, anything else?
No, I have nothing.
Okay, we are adjourned.